to a citizen, boy. Citizen to a citizen, boy.
Key to life.
Another one. And now, our feature presentation.
Welcome back, citizens, to episode 4 of 2A Talk. And we have an amazing show for you tonight. We covered a couple of topics, and they were kind of lighthearted, a little heavy-hearted and lighthearted. But tonight we are going to cover the topic that a lot of people struggle to have the conversation about, to even get started with, and that's the intersection between mental health and gun violence. We've seen so much gun violence. The news kind of depicts some of the violence or attaches some of the violence to mental illness and vice versa. But before we get into that, we gotta go ahead and introduce our guest tonight. Listen, she's done so much for the I Love Humans podcast, previously known as I Hate Humans. She was the co-host. She is the co-host. Is the co-host for the I Love Humans podcast. And she has given so much of her time, her energy, her input, and knowledge. She is a licensed clinical social worker, LCSW, specializing in mental health. And we knew that before we did any other shows that we need to have this individual on, schooling us on mental health and what she's experienced, what she's seen. We bring to you today, Casey Williams. Welcome, Casey, to the show. And of course, we have our co-host. We call him Thailand Will. AKA 3Dub. He's joining us again. He's sticking with us. Providing valuable feedback and input, asking these hard questions to our guests. Welcome back to the show, Thailand Will. Yeah, we've got
Easy,
one. We've got.
What's good, Willie? Did you hear that Freudian slip? Was the
Right. No, it wasn't a Freudian slip. Was the co-host of I Hate Humans, is the co-host of I Love Humans.
Nice cleanup, Serge.
Great recovery.
I'm learning. I'm getting into this media business, man. Cam and Mace over here. Yo.
Yeah.
Learning.
Oh man. Hey guys.
Listen, I'm so happy to have you guys on here. These are definitely the architects for the I Hate Humans and I Love Humans podcast that's been on for 4, 5, 6 years. Just discussing these. It's been that long, yeah. Been discussing these hard topics, and now we're on a different platform that we're kind of all familiar with, and we've had these conversations before. You guys have had me on the show before, and now we're bringing you on this platform and talking about it on this show. And we've got some questions for you, Casey, because inquiring minds, want to know. I want to know. I have, this is going to help me in with my classes and my interactions with people, because we've seen so much. Most recent, the main shooting And I'll roll a clip in of the main shooting.
And we're learning new details about the suspect's background with guns and about potential warning signs before last night's shooting. Sam Brock is in the suspect's hometown. Sam, what have you learned today?
Lester, law enforcement says a gun was found in that white Subaru. They are looking right now to see if it's the same weapon that was used in the mass shooting, as we are hearing from the Card family, who says that they alerted authorities that this is someone who needed help. In Robert Card's hometown of Bowdoin, Maine, area-wide shock.
It's mind-blowing. Everything about it's unbelievable. I mean, why this is going on and why this happened.
Even as the suspect's own family reveals chilling details about the decades-long Army reservist. His sister-in-law telling NBC News they alerted police and military officials that Card was experiencing an acute mental health episode in the months before Wednesday's massacre, saying he'd been fitted for high-powered hearing aids a couple of months ago and was picking up voices that he had never heard. His mind was twisting them around. The family concerned about the mental state of someone who performs gun training.
It was what we did, meeting him and the way that he showed us how to use a weapon, and that's smart.
Right. So where this gentleman, he went on a shooting spree, killed, I believe, a total of 18 people. 13 of them were injured. He suffered from mental illness. He was committed to a facility for 2 weeks. His family knew about it. In fact, prior to the shooting, his family, we find out afterwards, after he killed himself, that his family reached out to the local law enforcement and kind of said, hey, this gentleman, he has guns and he's not well. You should check on him. And allegedly, they didn't check on him. And weeks later, we had this massacre and a 2-day manhunt in which he knew he was going to kill himself. He did leave a note, and he followed through with that. So, sad. And there's many stories that are so similar to this, and we just want to get into it. But before we get into the hard questions, I'll ask you a quick light question. And this is for the viewers. I may know the answers, but this is for the viewers. Are you a firearm owner? Do you own a firearm?
I do. You know I do.
I know you do, but the viewers don't. Would you consider yourself pro 2A, pro Second Amendment? Because there are some. Okay, good. And I already know you've shot before, so so I won't even.
You watched me. Yes, I've shot before.
There you go. Will, I'll let you jump in here, or I could go on with another easy question because I know you've got the hard ones.
Yeah, I don't want to. I just want to keep the show on a responsible path.
It's so hard for you, Will.
You trying to go nut? You pick?
Yeah. Wow, that's crazy. I'm gonna let it go because we're doing the interview.
I'm gonna be quiet until I got some questions to ask.
All right. Well, I got one here that's going to bring us it's going to bring us right to the topic and bring us into the harder questions. Do you think there's a clear and present correlation between mental illness and gun violence?
No. The short answer to that is no. I think it's a very loaded question. So the problem that I see with automatically linking gun violence to mental health is that mental health already has a stigma attached to it. And so now you add in this layer of now these people that struggle with mental illness are more prone to gun violence. It's another stigma, which I think results in less people getting treated and evaluated and stuff like that. I think the other issue with that is that when you word it that way, then it takes out all of the other factors that might lead to gun violence. So we can't say that just because someone has a mental health illness, they're prone to gun violence.
Right.
Because there are other factors that add into that. It's not just that they have a mental illness, right? There are so many environmental factors that add into that. Access to guns, morals, how they're raised, what their issues are, economic status, like all of that stuff really plays a part in that. So I have an issue directly correlating the two. Right. Now, do I think there is some correlation? Probably, right? Like, if you got people just shooting up malls and movie theaters and clubs, something's clearly not right there. But I don't like us just solely saying that it's because there's a mental health issue, because I don't think that's accurate.
That's fair. That's fair, and that's a great high level viewpoint and response, considering that, like you said, you can't blame all of gun violence on mental illness. It could be the environment, it could be what they were taught, right? Because some of this stuff is taught, just like other undiagnosed illnesses is what we'll call other situations where people are taught to do this or react a certain way, which is, I mean, I have a clear example. There's this YouTube video or short that's been circulating where it's this kid's birthday. This kid might have been 6, 7, or 8, and I don't know if they were real guns or toy guns, and it was fake money, and you know, the kids were pointing the guns at each other. They looked like real guns, and it was clear there was fake money, and then the parents, or the adults rather, I'll just call them adults, were in the back cheering this type of behavior on, which is disturbing. So it's almost like we're grooming, or kids are being groomed to kind of behave that way. So that was a great answer. In terms of purchasing firearms, right? Because when you do purchase a firearm, you have to fill out a 4473, and it does ask you whether or not you suffer from any mental illness, or if you're on any type of drugs, or if you abuse drugs or alcohol. It does ask you that. That's why the shooter in Maine was denied his suppressor. My question is, if the government decides to make it a mandate to be evaluated before purchasing a firearm, and you're diagnosed with a mental defect, well, first let me. It's a two-part question. Do you think it's right, or would you support the government mandating that anyone who wants to purchase a firearm be subjected to a mental evaluation?
Another loaded question. So my initial answer to that is yes. The reason why I
light you up in the comments.
I know, right? Well, they gotta listen. No, so the reason why the answer is yes is because what is happening now isn't working, right? Yeah. Like, it's not working. And so something has to change. Now, what that is, what that looks like, I truly believe that it's one of those questions that everybody has an answer to. None of us know what the right answer is. Right. And so it's hard to say, like, this is the solution. That being said, the issue I have with people being evaluated is then you have to talk about, well, what determines a mental health disorder that allows for guns, which one doesn't, right? I wholeheartedly believe that if any one of us are evaluated, we're going to be diagnosed with something. We've all got stuff going on, right?
Exactly.
We all have things that are affecting us today and how we move and how we operate. And so anybody can be diagnosed with a mental health illness. You know, where mental health becomes a problem, and I struggle with even using that word, especially because of my profession, is it's how you function with that mental illness. And so, as I said, the issue here is which mental illness says, okay, yes, you can have a gun, which one doesn't, right? So that's why I said it's a really loaded question, because there's so many factors that go into that. It's not just a yes or no. It's how, who's going to do the evaluation? How are they going to be evaluated? Even as a psychologist or as clinical psychologist, as a social worker, even as we evaluate, there's no clear-cut definitions of what applies to this or what applies to that. And so a lot of that stuff is really can really be opinion based. So it's really murky water. But as I said, because what's happening now is clearly not working, something has to give. I think in this country we've constantly done things trial by error, right? Trial and error, right? So try it, let's see what happens. Right? It's how we've been living all our lives.
But then you run into the brick wall, or you run into the argument, which I would argue, the right to bear arms is a constitutional right.
It is.
So how can you create a mandate where you're evaluated to exercise your constitutional right?
Well, I believe that our constitutional rights should not infringe on other people's rights, right? So
that's the present argument,
right? So if I let's just go with the argument that people are going to be evaluated and they work this out and it works, right? Let's just say it works, right?
Okay.
If I have a mental health diagnosis and I'm deemed as a threat to society, why should I be able to bear arms? So that I can go hurt people?
And technically, that's why that question, and I'll roll in the question so everybody can see it. That's why that question exists on the 4473 and the Form 4 and the Form 1s. They ask that. And if the answer is yes, you are denied whatever it is that you're applying for regarding to NFA items or firearms. So, but I put that out there, of course, to go ahead and spark that conversation,
And for the record, there are other people that are denied that right. Felons are denied that right.
Yeah. Well, yeah, absolutely. So that's something to entertain, which leads me to the follow-up question. So let's say you are mentally diagnosed between a certain age, because you may get diagnosed as a child. And that's because you're still learning you're still learning, right? The mind is still developing. So that diagnosis may change as you get older, right? Let's say you get of age to purchase a firearm. But at that point in time, let's just say 18 or whatever, you're diagnosed with some sort of mental defect that, the new rules have said, you can't have a firearm right now. Would you support like a time period where you can get re-diagnosed? And if you're re-diagnosed and everything's better, the treatment or whatever therapy you've gone through has now fixed the problem, are you now able to purchase it? Should you now able to purchase a firearm? Yeah, can you be healed? Re-diagnosed, healed, and be able to purchase a firearm?
So, I almost don't even want to answer this question.
Listen, we thought about these questions. We surveyed 100 people. We family feuded this thing.
That's 100 men. Name something you like your girlfriend to do to your face. Okay. Rub it.
So here's the thing, right? And I have been in the mental health field for, I can't do math right now, but we're looking at probably a good 15, 16, probably more than that years, right?
Okay.
And I can't, now keep in mind that I have primarily worked with severe and persistent mental health disorders.
Okay.
And those disorders are really hard to overcome because they are just that severe and persistent.
Go go ahead and Google that. Send me the definition, and I'll go ahead and post that across so everybody knows what severe and persistent disorders are. Go ahead.
I think our viewers know words. I think they know what severe means, and I think they know what persistent means. So I think they get it. I hope they get it.
Okay.
Thank you, Will. So with that being said, I can't tell you that I've ever seen someone struggling with mental health that has just overcome it. We've learned to function.
Yeah.
They've learned to live high functioning lives. But I can't tell you that I've ever seen a case where someone was diagnosed with something and then went back and they no longer had this disorder. I've never seen it. Not saying it hasn't happened. I've never seen it. People get better. They get better with treatment. They learn to function. They learn to live healthy lives. But right. I can't tell you that that's a thing, to be quite honest. Even as children. So as children, and children disorders are a little complicated because a lot of them are based on behavioral issues, right? So children tend to grow out of behavioral issues. There are certain diagnoses that children have, or there are certain things that children are diagnosed with, disorders that children are diagnosed with as children that they cannot be diagnosed with as adults, right? So conduct disorder, for instance, is a child diagnosis. You're not going to be diagnosed with conduct disorder as an adult. So what that happens is that diagnosis will change to an adult diagnosis.
Right.
Does that make sense?
No, that makes perfect sense. So as long as you've been practicing is pretty much as long as I've been experiencing it, probably longer because of my younger brother. He suffers from drug addiction, which started at 18, which kind of the type of drug that he took. It was a trip he never came back from, and it caused severe mental. I don't know the term, but we'll just call it a mental defect, to the point where he still thinks he's 18, but he's 40. Let's see. He's 46 years of age, homeless, still stuck in that mindset. So I definitely get that. Been to many doctors, refuses to take medication. He only takes the medication when he needs a good meal and a place to stay for 5 days until they release him back out on the streets and he gets Baker acted again. Damn. But yeah, so that's huge. I've got the greatest follow-up question, because all of us know somebody in law enforcement. Do you think law enforcement should be evaluated prior to becoming an officer and throughout their careers periodically to see if they're mentally stable enough to deal with the public and carry a firearm?
That's an easy one. Absolutely. They need to be evaluated every year.
Oh, every 12 months? I was thinking every 6 months.
I'll take that. And that's solely because of the sheer amount of violence and stress that comes with that position that they're exposed to. Absolutely. Hands down, no questions asked.
Yeah. No, I agree. And, a lot of people, they throw a lot of shade to law enforcement because, you only see the bad things. Only the bad situations are put out there in the media, social media, the news. Like your guy, Derek Chauvin, those situations and many more, where they just see this abusive power. But there are very, very good police officers out there. We know a couple personally, family, friends, and it's terrible that they're not highlighted enough. Also, that they may not because they're so used to uh, their environment, they may not know that it's impacting them, which is us, which is people in normal, growing up in a normal environment. And Will, I think I'm going to throw this one over to you because we all suffer from some form of PTSD. Growing up, maybe we're not in that environment now, but we grew up for many, many years in that environment. It doesn't mean that PTSD goes away. That just means we've learned to live with it.
Like I was just saying.
Yeah.
Yes, it definitely shapes us. But I got so many questions based off of this whole discussion so far. Hypothetically speaking, if we are evaluating police officers, biannually or annually, however it is that we do it, what would it be that they're being evaluated for that could potentially deem them as unfit to do their job as law enforcement officers?
So I think it'd probably be that it would probably be the PTSD. What, how has what they've seen, anything that they, because, like, I think now, even like with officer involved shootings, I'm pretty sure that they have to go through some type of evaluation after to ensure that they can go back to work. So it would be the same thing. Just, I think it would be looking to see or evaluating whether or not the things that they've seen, anything that they've endured, has affected their ability to use sound judgment.
Okay. Now, with that in mind, if we're using that same standard to evaluate civilians, hypothetically, how can we do that and not infringe upon a civilian's Second Amendment right if their PTSD is the result of coming up in an environment that they didn't choose, where they're exposed to things that may change how they respond to what they're to what they're exposed to moving forward? How do we do that without bias?
Right. So, I mean, that was exactly the point of why I said, yeah, my initial answer is yes, but there's so much that goes into that. It's not just this clear cut, we're going to do this and this is how that works. I think studies have to go into that. We have to figure out what that looks like. There's not just a clear cut answer to that, because I don't know.
It's a slippery slope, man.
It's a very slippery slope. But as I said, I stand on the premise of what we're doing now isn't working. Something's got to give.
Let me read a quote.
Something has to change.
Let me read a quote from this is Psychiatric Times. So Erin, let me get her name. I just want to get your opinion on this. This is Erin O'Brien. She wrote a white paper, an article in Psychiatric Times. So I'm going to read this word for word so I don't get... okay, let me just read it word for word. Attempts to connect mental illness to mass shootings are a distraction that inflicts enormous damage by taking attention from solutions that could actually prevent such events.
Damn.
This perpetuates a false narrative that encourages a stigmatism of and discrimination against the millions of Americans living with mental health conditions. All right. Although the prevalence of mental illness in mass shooters is generally overestimated, it's more overestimated for some racial groups than it is for others. In a recent analysis of news coverage, so just as news coverage, so basically Erin went and looked at the news coverage. This is not anything else. So in recent analysis of news coverage of 219 mass shootings, it was found that white mass shooters were 19 times more likely to be framed as mentally ill or as good people suffering from extreme life circumstances, whereas Black and Latino mass shooters were more often framed as terrorists or ongoing threats to public safety. What's your views on that statement?
So the first portion is what I was saying, right? Is that just adds to the stigmatism of mental health. I wholeheartedly agree with that. And it's funny that you brought that up, because that was one of the points that I wanted to make, is that I think intentionally or unintentionally, depending on who you ask, this conversation wholeheartedly becomes a race issue. Because when we're looking at those races, right, that have probably the most what's the word I'm looking for? Trauma. There you go. Thank you. The most trauma, you're looking at people of color, right? Our neighborhoods, our environments, our family structure, slavery, right? The list goes on, right? And so then what happens is, just to name a few, right? And so then what happens now is that who are the people that are going to be left unarmed?
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Will.
No, will you finish? I don't want to cut you off.
I think I was done. So I was saying that I agree with her statement. I wholeheartedly agree with that statement. But once again, this is the dynamic that we're constantly having to figure out in this country. Everything becomes a race conversation.
Yeah.
What I was just about to say, it is a matter of race, but I don't think it takes away from the point that mental illness is a major factor in all criminal activity. So even if the perpetrator is a white man shooting up people for no apparent reason, it doesn't take away from the fact that a person who is committing a crime is more likely to suffer from a mental illness than someone who's not. And as a matter of fact, when people go to prison, they get a mental evaluation and they're put on medication. So
not all of them. They're not all put on medication.
I don't think they all take it.
No, they're not all put on medication. That's not a thing.
Okay. Well, they at least get an evaluation.
Yes, they are evaluated. That's true.
And from what I saw, upwards of 60-something% of inmates are diagnosed with a mental illness. And for people who commit violent crimes, there are certain mental illnesses that are more likely to be associated with those people, like severe depression, anxiety, and things of the sort. So we do have some sort of window that we can look into and say, well, if a person is dealing with this, then maybe they shouldn't be allowed to have a firearm. But I think it also puts us in a position where we have to, because it's a Second Amendment right, because it's our constitutional right as citizens, if we have a portion of society that's suffering from severe depression or anxiety, we have to address the reason behind it. And this is, I think, where the race comes in. Nobody gives a shit about it until the perpetrators are white. So now the discussion is on the table.
Right. So the other thing that I want to point out, Will, that you kind of highlighted, well, that you tapped into, that I want to highlight, is that, you know, when people hear the word mental health, we automatically go into this severe picture of what mental health is. People that are like hearing voices and super depressed and suicidal. But mental health looks a lot different on a day-to-day basis, right? Like it just, like I can tell you as someone that's in the field, has worked directly with, has direct client contact, all of that. It looks very, very different on a day-to-day basis. And so I think that also adds to the discussion of when we're talking about mental health, because we're not talking about people that are just walking around hearing voices and talking to themselves. And like, that's not what that automatically looks like. And then the other thing that I wanted to just highlight is that there are, so for instance, I know in the state of Florida, I don't know many other states, but I know the state of Florida, if you have a domestic violence charge, you can't get a firearm.
Yeah, same thing in North Carolina. If you have a domestic violence
Right.
charge, you can't get a firearm.
What's the difference?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great point. We were talking numbers. We kind of touched on suicide. Not let me take that back. Not fun fact, but known fact that a lot of people don't know. This is a known unknown or unknown known. What do you think between 2022 and 2023 was the leading cause of gun-related deaths in America, in the United States? What do you think? What do you think it was? Do you think it was mass shootings? Do you think it was domestic violence? What do you think it was?
Was it suicide?
Suicide.
Kind of tipped his hand already.
Kind of did, but I figured she would know this number. She probably gets a weekly newsletter saying, "Hey, somebody offed themselves this week."
I don't,
5,000
but I
people.
did know that.
So just
I tried to play it off. Did you not hear me ask a question? Like, what? Gosh, Will.
just to give you the numbers.
I'm not taking any credit from you. I know you know. I'm just saying he said it already.
Kind of did. So in 2022, there were 44,313 gun-related deaths. Right, considered gun violence deaths is the term that's used that they're tracking. Now, of the 44,313, 20,223 stemmed from homicide, murder, accidents, or defensive gun use. That's 20,000. 24,000 stemmed from suicide, 24,090. And then incidents qualified as mass shooting in 2022 were 617. So there's a problem there. I mean, yeah, there's a problem with deaths, homicide, murders, because there's 20,000 of them that happened last year. But if we
Do you know the race stats on that?
The what?
By any chance? Race
what was the
stats
question?
on that? Like how many of? Do you know the race
No.
stats on that by any chance? Like how many?
No, it doesn't break it down. Well, this particular article doesnn't break it down by race, but that would be interesting to go ahead and research to see, who's offing themselves. Yeah, that might be another show. That might be a part two to this one where we can figure out, okay, well, where's this happening? Where are these suicides happening? Is it mostly Black people? Is it mostly Latinos, white people?
I'd also like to know, like, if it's
Jewish.
I would also like to know if is it in urban communities? Is it in rural communities?
Right. So let's go over the suicide stats again by race, as far as who's
Yes.
killing,
So
who's
I have it up from the CDC.
Okay.
So the least amount were Native Hawaiian and other Pacific Islander.
Okay.
Then the American Indian or Alaska Native. Then multiracial. Then Asian. Then Blacks.
Who's the top
Then
three?
Hispanic. Then white. Top three: white, Hispanic, and Black.
What do you think?
In that order.
In your opinion, based on what you've seen, what do you think is the common denominator for that's driving that rate of suicide?
I don't have an official answer for that, but what I will say is suicide is normally driven by the thought of this doesn't get better, right? Like there's just no way out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the short answer to that. I mean, we could talk about that. That's a whole nother show.
So for people with that
Mentality.
mind frame, yeah. What mental illnesses are most commonly associated with people who think that way? Is it depression? Is it
Major depression? So there's an actual major depressive disorder. In order to have major depressive disorder, there has to be an element of suicidality. Suicidal thoughts, ideations.
So
another
larger number of white males are probably suffering from major depression than other groups.
I don't know that you can make that correlation that way. I don't know if there's a direct correlation to that.
I did come across in the same article something that was highlighted by Erin, which is the risk factors for future violence. So evidence-based behavioral risk factors are past violent behavior, domestic violence.
Can I cut you off for a quick second? So in anything they'll tell you the number one indicator for future behavior is a history of behavior.
It's
kind of just
yeah. But and that's what I thought. I was like, this is kind of common sense. I'm just going through the first column. The second column is it may shock you, it may not shock you. So the first column is past violent behavior, domestic violence, risky substance abuse, and risky alcohol abuse. That's almost common sense, right? You get a lot of adverse behavior out of that. Factors related to personality, identity, and life experience that may also be helpful is exposure to violence, being male, being young, and impulsive anger. That's just little boys growing up. Impulsive anger.
Sounds about right. Sounds about right.
So it's like, and this is listed. The title is Risk Factors for Future Violence. And underneath that title, is impulsive anger, which is usually found in young males, right? Young people in general, more so young males. And then being
all that testosterone y'all got.
If you trying to go nut, you pick.
Yeah. Wow, that's crazy. I'm gonna let it go because we're doing the interview.
And then exposure to violence. So if they're seeing violence, which is typically either in the home or in the environment that they're growing up in, now they begin to emulate that or think that that's the norm, i.e. a mild case of PTSD. I'm not an expert or a professional. I haven't studied.
I don't even know if I would label it mild.
There you go. Coming from a professional.
I mean, you think, and especially because, like all three of us grew up in that environment, right?
Yeah.
Like, shout out to New York, but let's be clear. Brooklyn is Brooklyn.
Yeah. Brooklyn is Brooklyn.
The Bronx is the Bronx, right?
And nobody from Brooklyn or the Bronx, the only borough that's named the Bronx. Anyway, are sitting here thinking that anything is wrong because it's the norm. It's like, no, we grew up. That's how we grew up.
I wouldn't go as far to say that we don't think anything is wrong. I think we all know that there's some issues there. I think we're just so immune to it. We are desensitized. We are desensitized to it because it's what we have seen.
Yeah.
So it makes perfect sense.
Yeah. On that note, because oftentimes I think for, I guess, a variety of different reasons, people talk about being desensitized to being exposed to certain things. Mm-hmm. Does that mean that they're not impacted by it? Does it mean that they're not shaped by it?
No.
Okay.
Not at all.
Okay. I just wanted that to be clear.
Not at all.
Well, I mean, some would say that the way we grew up in our era, that it made us better people, it made us stronger people.
It's funny.
To a lot.
I think there's what can be said, and I think this is just a principle of nature. Everything is about balance, and this is not a two-way thing really, but everything is about balance. So when you are exposed to something terrible, it kind of shows you your capacity to be the opposite. It shows you, just how much resilience you have, and I think when you're allowed to know that about yourself, it's definitely empowering. But
right.
I think the reality is, and you guys can let me know if you disagree, but I think the reality is most people who come from those environments don't overcome it. In the vein of talking about New York and how it has shaped us, right? Casey, can you speak to like what, in your experience, I think this is something you might be able to speak to. In your experience, what environmental factors negatively impact someone's mental health?
I think the better question to that is which environmental factors don't.
Shit.
Damn. Right.
But it didn't do that for them.
Are there no commonalities that people share who have like certain mental disorders, like where if like there's like an avatar basically, like a person who's dealt with abandonment or abuse, or it is more likely to
I don't think it's that clear cut. Yeah, if you choose any mental health disorder, whether it be major depressive disorder, post-traumatic stress, generalized anxiety, what that looks like for me is going to look very different for Will or for Serge, right? So there are no clear-cut answers as to anybody that goes through X, Y, and Z is going to now be diagnosed with A, B, or C. That's not how that works in any capacity. And so it's hard to answer those questions about, what's prone, people that are prone to abandonment, what they do. Because there are people that have been abandoned as children that go and do crazy things and they're all messed up and they're angry with the world. And there are people that take that same situation and decide, I don't want to live like that, so I'm going to do something different.
Right.
Yeah, I'm aware of that. My question is more so like the people who are diagnosed. Like, are there things that they share? Like, not necessarily, that was more so it. Like, are there things that these people have in common? From the.
I mean, on some level, the answer to that is yes. There's just not a clear-cut answer to it. Yeah. On some level, somebody's going to share something with somebody else, but I can't say that. For the most part, they do this, or the most part they do that. It's just not that clear cut. It would be irresponsible of me to say yes to that.
So with that said, we've had an amazing discussion. We've barely scratched the surface. We've touched on a couple of things, just to get your opinion and your what you've experienced. Is it safe to say that we can't just put gun violence underneath the umbrella of mental illness? Is it safe to say that?
Very safe to say that.
While some of these instances are a result of mental illness, it's a whole lot bigger than mental illness.
I mean, go ahead. Right, and that's what I'm saying. I think Will said this earlier, and I agree with that. I think it all does have, there is some element of mental illness. It's just not the only thing. And that's what I want people to understand. Like, it's not just, I have a mental illness and now I'm going to go do X, Y, and Z. It's just not that clear cut. And that is the issue with correlating gun violence to mental illness, right? So I do think there's an element of mental illness. Like, sane, and I hate using those words as the professional, right? But sane people, for the purpose of this conversation, don't go out and commit mass shootings. Right. Sane people do not commit suicide. Right. Like, those are things that are heavily induced by some type of mental health. What the issue is that there's so many other environmental factors that go into that. And so when we want to correlate mental health with gun violence, we are Xing out all of those other factors. And that's why it's not the thing to say. Does that make sense?
No, that makes perfect sense. That makes perfect sense. I mean, there's so much more that I want to learn and want to pick your brain on, and just get your perspective on. I mean, we tried and to touch on certain things just to bring some awareness or start the discussion, but I have a feeling that this is going to be, one of perhaps a 4-part series where we really dig into certain things and start to kind of analyze certain situations, maybe home in on one particular issue and just talk about that for an entire show. But listen, we're super appreciative of you joining, giving us your time, giving us this free therapy session. I don't want to see any invoices in the mail.
We're gonna get it.
Cut the check. But no, this was. I hope our viewers really chime in and talk about this. It's, we laugh, we joke. But it's a serious topic. And we want to hear from as many people as we can. Maybe you're suffering from something. If you're in Florida, we got a professional that you can see. But if not, I'll go ahead and run the telephone numbers for the different states. The hotline, I think it's 988 is the suicide hotline number. If you're feeling any type of way, or if you know somebody that's feeling any type of way, you see something, say something. It's too much senseless killings and deaths and murders and just things happening that we can all come together and have an open discussion and try and stop in an amicable way where people don't end up in the dirt. But listen, Casey, we thank you. We thank you so much for your time. Will, you want to jump in here?
I second that as usual, man. Thank you, Casey, for joining us and lending us your expert.
Yeah, I know how I feel about that word.
I know. But I love to use it, especially when it comes to you, because I really respect what it is that you do and the work that you put in and how much you care. And I think these types of discussions in the 2A community are important because I think some people in the 2A community hear the topic and they may feel like it's an attack. The intention is to infringe upon their rights. So
right.
To have someone who's knowledgeable in the field of mental health have the discussion and be a 2A positive person. Yeah. I think that's essential, and it adds great value to the community, and I think it'll help to drive to drive things forward in a good way in America when it comes to gun rights and gun violence. I think these are the discussions that need to be had. So happy that you did it with us, and I'm happy I was here to have it.
I'd like to thank you both for having me. And I just want to thank you. I want to thank you guys both for even having this discussion. I don't think we talk about it enough. And so just opening the doors to have these conversations, I think, are super, super important. And so I appreciate you both for taking the time to make that happen.
Well, listen, thanks for tuning in. We more than likely will have another 3, 4, 5 episodes of this topic just to really dig in and talk about this. But
you've been listening to 2A Talk, watching 2A Talk, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Citizen to
You're still here. It's over.
Another one.